Hey, your fly's open.
Maybe they say for them this way is finished. INOC, yeah, maybe, I don't know. But they don't seem to be interested in us. So why are we interested in?
Maybe you let me just interrupt at this moment. Should we? No. Like to ask you to explore in all the feelings you had during this process, to share all the feelings you had, the different feelings, and take them serious and explore into your feelings and their meaning. So what meanings did your feelings have? And we would like to invite you to split up this whole group in sets of 6. So 6 people sitting together. We would suggest that you go somewhere up on the balcony and sit there and just try to understand your feelings. The feelings as community. We would suggest that you take 30 minutes for that. This would mean clockwise that we meet here at 6 o'clock.
The difference that these guys here on stage made, because we obviously observed something that's self-organizing, we took that lead, and we were also pretty sure in our conclusion that it probably would have happened faster if those guys would have been not there. So what was the difference, the contribution of them there? And we kind of concluded that they probably, the initial within us expectation was if somebody's up there, maybe they represent something like hierarchy, like leadership, so they have to do now something for us.
During that time, because we lost the sense of purpose, because we focused on these people, and we were irritated, lost, other feelings.
Frustrated. Well,
Yeah.
impatient.
Alienated. I felt alienated. They, it's we and they.
But talking about it and finding companions made it better, I guess, was our conclusion.
I'm just feeling uncomfortable on the fact that 1/3 of us is not here anymore. And I just wonder what does that mean? 1/3.
1/3.
1/3. Yes.
Of the people.
Of the people.
Of the people are not here anymore.
There were 60 when we were in the large circle.
At least.
62, I think.
So, and now we are 30 something.
41.
What happens with you with that?
Again?
What happens with you if you see that or realize that?
And it might be a projection, is how many of us run away when there is autocracy. I don't know how to pronounce it right. You guys can have it. Yeah. And over lunch, I was having a conversation with John, and we were talking about American politics. And he was saying that only 42% of people voted. And then we were talking about those 22% that voted one side and 21 something that voted the other side. And what about all the others that are silent?
But may I invite you, even if it's not so easy to do that, but maybe to talk a little bit more about the feelings you had and how you made sense of your feelings when you shared them. So what did your feelings tell you? What to do, for instance, and how to stand it. So maybe, I know it's not a very easy task, so, but maybe you just concentrate a little bit on how you felt and what did you do with your feelings.
So I felt, wow, it's a task stopper. So I immediately turned into an observer as a way of coping with whatever. I didn't have any high levels of anxiety. I wasn't aware of feeling anxious, but because this is my default is to go, oh, what's happening here? You know, it's my thing. Well, wow, okay, wow, let's see. Oh, this is going to be really interesting. So I was able to turn into be an observer as my kind of internal reaction response to what was happening. It gave me a way to be present. And I turned into being fascinating like that. If it had gone on longer, I was about to talk about my feelings when the circle, when you guys made that cool invention of let's include them in a circle. So that's what happened to me.
It feels to people not being here make me feel like as if I lost a part of myself. That would be a feeling. I feel like as if I'm losing a arm or leg, being broken.
Did anybody have any compassion with the autocrats?
So when we first start out to collect the experience from yesterday and to put that in context on our work as organizational developers, be it internally or externally, I wanted to tell you a little bit about our work on the topic of autocrats. It started around 6 months ago, and when we first started, we thought there is a rise of autocrats in society as well as in organizations. And that got us thinking how we can approach this topic as organizational developers. And so our very first thought was, how is it possible that in democratic societies, people actually choose autocrats as leaders? That got us thinking into the why. And also we looked into organizations and saw while there is a lot of effort to get rid of hierarchies and to be more democratic, there's also, we feel that, a backlash of leaders having to have more power, especially if we look into some organizations, let's say the automotive industry, where they have big scandals of people that are currently running through the media. And so we thought, why is that happening and how can that happen? And that got us thinking into, and you can approach that from an intellectual, scientific way. I, as a psychologist, could tell you a lot about narcissistic behaviors and so forth and the dark triad. But then we said, why is it that people are voluntarily drawn to that? And so we came across that it has had to do something with people and their thoughts, and also that got us thinking of how do people feel? Why is it coming that they're actually drawn to autocrats? And we discovered, and we looked a little bit, and we thought about emotions like fear, being lost, and so forth. And so also, so we thought it might be a good idea to approach this topic from this direction. And this is why we chose a setting yesterday, not going the intellectual route, but to offer something that all these underlying stuff could happen. And from what I heard yesterday from you and us reflecting emotions, that is a lot of things that I hear in organizations, this feeling frustrated, angry, there's no orientation, or being sad. All these things are actually things that happen a lot in organizations these days, and these are things that we as organizational developer encounter a lot. And so I personally think we can go a good step from there to look at our realities in organizations. And but we said yesterday we also want to give you some insights on critical action learning and how they deal with that kind of topic. And so I'm going to hand over to Mike now to explain and explore a little bit about that kind of.
Okay, thank you, Susanne. Good morning, everybody. It's ironical. We were talking about the British sense of humour. So it's ironical that you should ask a Brit to explain critical theory, because it comes from Germany. And this is where some of the most important ideas of the last century come from. And no doubt when John talks later, he will acknowledge some of the roots of the OD movement, which come from, in fact, work done in Germany before the Second World War. So I have this ironical task to do, which I'll try and do briefly. I get feedback from all sorts of people, from my wife about taking too long to get started, so I have to tell several jokes, I have to get myself into the discussion, and then I get feedback from Bernhard saying, oh no, that's too theoretical, you mustn't say that, you must remember these are practical people, they want to know how to do this. So I'm going to try and be short, maybe about 15 minutes. Can you dig me? Yeah, okay. And I have 4 cards. Actually, I did have 5. Oh yeah, I have 5 cards, yeah. And so one of them is called critical theory. One of them is called critical facilitation. How do we do that? One of them is called critical action learning. And the other one is called why is this important? That's the only card which remains the same from last night after I got my feedback from Bernhard. So, oh, I've got a 5th card there, so I put that back. So so this is very short, try to be very short. Critical theory. This we associate with something called the Frankfurt School, the Frankfurt Institute for Social Affairs, which in 1929, a man called Max Horkheimer became the director of. He was a man who'd left school at 15 to join his father's business. He was a rich Jewish person living in Stuttgart, I think. Stuttgart, a famous place near here. Yeah, okay, good. He was more interested in social philosophy, and so he, with several colleagues, including particularly Theodor Adorno, set up, well, not set it up because it was all there already, began a work on a radical program of social critique. And their two intellectual mentors would be Marx. And remember, Marx came at the end of a long line of German philosophers, and Marx's emphasis was, it's not about understanding the world, it's also about changing the world. So revolutionary Marxism is about overthrowing the system. The Frankfurt School were less revolutionary than that. They also took insights from Freud, who was just across the border. And so they tried to combine the ideas of these two thinkers into a powerful way of critiquing society and also how to change society. They undertook a series of interesting projects. It was interrupted by the war, and in fact, Horkheimer had to leave Germany in about 1933, I think, as did most of the people associated with the Institute. Some people got out, some didn't. Walter Benjamin was one of the people. He committed suicide on the Spanish border, I think, trying to get out. And then, for a time, they spent time in America at Columbia University, and then later on the West Coast in Los Angeles, and produced a number of important works. So what were when Horkheimer wrote his address for his first, I can't remember whether he was director or president, but for his first address, the phrase he used was, we're seeking human emancipation from slavery. And we could translate slavery now as oppression or domination or going along with an authoritarian philosophy and way of doing things. So how can we get human emancipation from slavery? They also had the aim of, we want to enable people to become the producers of their own lives. So we want people to take charge and somehow construct their own lives in the way they would like to have those lives created. This is nearly 100 years ago. Just got my cards in the wrong order. One of the things that was involved very much in this was an analysis of power and how power is distributed around society or around, well, mainly society they were focused on, how it's used and how it's abused to keep people down or enthralled. And of course, one of the things that they tried to do was understand the rise of National Socialism and how that came to have such a powerful grip on the nation. And in America, not Horkheimer, but Adorno and colleagues wrote a book called The Authoritarian Personality, which came out in 1949. And the methodology of that book has been much criticized, but it was had a very powerful impact. They produced something called the F scale, F for fascism, and this scale had various dimensions on it. The dimensions were things like a tendency to be authoritarian yourself, submissiveness to authority, anti-intellectualism, a certain amount of destructiveness, wanting to destroy things. And we see some of these traits around today. We have a British government minister who said, we've heard enough from the experts, we've heard enough from the intellectuals, you know. And so there's some of that feeling around today. So another important dimension of the Institute was, because it was about social transformation, it's also about individual transformation. So they emphasized a lot self-reflection and where am I sitting in this system? And so I have to free myself as well as, so I can help other people become free. So that was obviously the influence of Freud and the effects of his methodologies. Now, I'm not quite sure what order the next two slides come in. You know, there's no such thing as an order. Actually, the French critical theorists pointed that out to us. They have a different tradition. But people like Foucault and Lyotard, they mix things up. They say there's no way of ordering, no single way of ordering things. You can order it any way you like. But, and I did think at one time of handing the cards out and then collecting them back in the order they came. But anyway, I think I'll just go on to action learning, critical action learning. When I heard this phrase, good to get a bit faster. When I heard this phrase nearly 25 years ago now, I didn't understand what it meant. I thought here was some academic trying to be clever about action learning. And had he ever done any action learning, I thought. That's what I actually challenged him from the audience. And he said, oh yes, I tried to do it with my students. And I thought, poof, you know, action learning is an activity between peers, it's between equals. The idea of action learning is to help each other work on difficult tasks and challenges, and to learn from tackling those difficult tasks and challenges. But this man, who was a critical social theorist, that's how he described himself, because since the days of the Frankfurt Institute, the ideas about using an analysis of power to get a very good diagnosis of what's wrong has spread to a number of other things, such as feminism, anti-colonialism, anti-racism. All of these movements, if you like, in a way, share that way of approaching the analysis. And so he called himself a critical social theorist, and he said, the problem is that when you have managers in a company, and Jörg over there has just been showing me 100 managers from Munich airport gathered together in a room smaller than this, yes, with some facilitators working on the difficult problem of the airport. This man said that what you can't do, because ordinary critical thinking isn't strong enough to get outside the culture and the norms of that company, people will still think inside that set of norms. They won't question fundamental values embodied in managerialism, individualization of work, performance orientation of work. They won't be able to question these things because they don't have a strong enough external view. So he said we need some critical social theory, and we need to be able to challenge the assumptions underlying current best practice, current best ways to do things. And how do you get that without some of the sort of analysis that the critical theorists brought about? The other thing about critical action learning, so critical action learning, CAL, equals AL plus CST, critical social theory. That's the formula, if you can make it work. But it has to be said that, like the Frankfurt people, we're engaged in an inquiry. We don't know how to do this exactly. We're learning how to do it. And it has become a quest for some people, including Bernhard and colleagues in Germany. So, but it emphasizes the collective as well as the individual reflection. Together, if we reflect together and share our thinking and our understanding of how things are working around here, then we have a better chance of understanding the system and therefore of beginning to think about changing it. We focus on power relations and how power is used in this organization or this society to achieve things and also not to achieve things. So what is the power stopping from happening? We've had many cases recently of sexual harassment is a good example, isn't it? Where all of a sudden everybody says, oh yes, of course, we knew this was happening. We knew this was happening. You never get in the lift with that man. Did you hear this? Yeah, I mean, it's... but why isn't that being spoken about publicly? Why is it something colleagues say to each other, but they don't say publicly? And if it doesn't become public, it can't be used to change the public discourse and behaviour of the organisation. So that's just an example. I won't go on to emissions scandals. That might be another one, but that might be closer to home. Well, no, it's not closer to home. No, we're both close to home, aren't they? And one of the things we hope to do with understanding the way power works is and through public reflection is we might get some insight into organisational dynamics, how organisations work to make some things possible, other things not possible. So a colleague of mine, Russ Vince, has written a very nice paper called Learning in Action or Learning in Action. So action learning is supposed to be about learning in action. So we take action, and as a result of action, we reflect on it, and then we learn from it. But also, even in the action learning group, you can get a conspiracy to produce inaction. The one word, inaction, no action. So you persuade me that what I'm thinking about doing is so dangerous to my career that I better not do it. Okay? There's a sort of collusion taking place in the set. So what we would want to do in critical action learning, if we saw that happening, we would want to challenge that and point that out. I think sometimes if Revens was here, my mentor Reg Revens, who died in 2003, he would say, well, that's what action learning does. So he wouldn't say critical action learning is any different from what he thought of as action learning. But critical action learning really is post-Revens. It's really coming after his time. So how do we do critical theory? Is that my third card? How am I doing? Couple more. So that's 30 minutes on 2 cards, 2 minutes for 2 more cards. Okay, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? If I just find the right card. So how do we do it? Yes, okay. So I think this is the least clear card to me. How do we do it? Bernhard made a statement to me when we were talking on the telephone or over Skype, I think. He said, it's about leading people away from authoritarian structures. So the facilitation process is how can we lead people away from being bound by, being captured by authoritarian structures. One of the things that we might do is we might raise awareness by highlighting contradictions in the way things happen in organisations. So we say that we want more participation, and then on the other hand, we stop people speaking, or we make it possible not for people to speak, or only for some people to speak, and not other people to speak. And to point out these things and to highlight these things. We uncover how we collude, understanding how we collude and go along with things. Mark Hughes talked about this. He was another of the Frankfurt people who went to America, Herbert Mark Hughes, and he talked about it kills you softly. You know that song, Killing You Softly with something? Yeah. Because you get used to this, you go along with it, then slowly you get killed. Slowly your independence and your freedom, you get killed. You become part of that unchanging mass which is stopping the freedom coming through. We question assumptions. The most famous person still alive from the Frankfurt tradition is Jürgen Habermas, who must be nearly 90 years old now. But Habermas has been a very important person in taking the Frankfurt Institute ideas, starting in revolutionary Marxism, but moving towards, well, how do we get a better quality of democracy? Which is a really important question around at the time when many people have lost their faith in our political systems as representing them, certainly in the UK. This is why Brexit partly comes about. But Habermas has been concerned to set up what he calls ideal speech communities. And in the ideal speech community, each one of us has an equal voice and also an equal right to challenge. You can be challenged, I can be challenged. None of us is above challenge. And that's if you think of that, you're trying to create that in an organisation. No person is above challenge. That's quite a challenging thing to think about. But that's... Okay, yeah, okay, you put me. I'll be quick. We also need to understand interesting things like how the system sees off challenge. So again, this is Marcuse, and he calls this repressive tolerance. He said managers learn how to say, okay, let's hear some new ideas about how to do this. Okay, well, we hear from you, that's very interesting. Yes, we hear from you, very interesting. And you want to do something else, and you want to do something else altogether. And, oh, yes, that's a very good idea. And then you say, well, it's been really interesting listening to all your ideas about how to do things differently. But because you're all in different positions, what we'll do at the moment is to carry on doing what we're doing now. So challenge can be, we become very sophisticated at seeing it off, seeing the challenge off. And Marcuse calls this repressive tolerance. Anyway, that's something about that. One of the things that we might hope to become is what the Americans, Deborah Meyerson, Doreen Scully, call tempered radicals. So the notion that we can be both radical, we want to rock the boat, but also we are loyal to this organisation in some ways, so we want to stay in the boat. And the reason we rock the boat is because we have an ideology, some values of our own, which are at odds with what the organisation is doing. So we disagree with how the organisation is in this respect. Maybe the way it treats its lower paid workers or something like that. We have a strong feeling that this is wrong. So we want to raise that and challenge on that basis. At the same time, we don't want to lose our position in the company because we value that in another way. And she called, these two American researchers call this tempered radicalism. We remain radical, but we get tempered by the process. You know tempering, where you heat steel and it becomes harder through the heating and beating process. So, okay, brilliant. I know the Germans would always have a word for it, but or four words for it. Yeah. So that's just something about critical facilitation, what we'd hope to do. It's true that we don't know how to do it. We're learning how to do it, and hopefully we'll get better. And why do we want to do it? 4 reasons. And the first reason is personal emancipation, so that I don't get taken in. I don't get fooled. And there's a phrase I picked up from a man who said, it's almost a willful determination not to get taken in. I have what we call a good crap detector. Do you know that phrase? You know, I can tell when I'm being bullshitted. I can tell when I'm being taken along with something I don't really agree with. So personal emancipation from those ideas. Corporate guardianship. Who blows the whistle on emissions scandals, on sexual harassment, on the ill treatment of people, on the bad way we treat our suppliers? Who raises these questions? So, and these can be good for the company in the long run. It may not feel like it at the time, and it may be tough work. Good citizenship is a third reason. Politically aware people are aware of the dangers of not retaining that critical awareness, and they're more able to resist demagogues and people who make promises like, we'll take all the money from Europe and spend it on the National Health Service, which is a promise that was made to the British people by by our Foreign Secretary, as a matter of fact. Amazing. And then, if this isn't enough, a critical stance may very well help leadership and management in those very difficult areas where there are no simple and straightforward solutions, but where we have to challenge and question the way we're doing things, because we may have to reorganize the way we do things in order to tackle them. And these are what we call sometimes the wicked problems, and we could go into more detail on this, but where there are no simple solutions, where in fact there are many ways to tackle them. We have different stakeholders pulling in different directions, different power dynamics and so on. So that's just a very quick run through why it's important. I think it's really important. I think the reason why this is the theme for this conference is that some of us are worried about the extent to which the autocrats or the authoritarians are beginning to gain a hold on parts of our societies, and we don't seem able to somehow stop that happening. The work is difficult work. Action learning Revens called it comrades in adversity. He said a small action learning group is a group of comrades who are helping each other do this difficult work. And because it's lonely work, there are many downsides of trying to be critical in organisations, as I'm sure you know. It's a dangerous business. So you need colleagues who will help you, but not collude with you, help you to challenge, help you calibrate the challenge, and this is the essence of the tempered radical.